Undroppables Playbook, a football podcast. With your hosts, Ashley and Michael, please sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Undroppables Playbook, a football podcast presented by the Undroppables and sponsored by Analyst Depot. I am one of your hosts, Ashley. This is my lovely co-host, Michael Duncan. How are you?
Well, as you can tell, I am currently at the World Series Game 4 in Philadelphia.
Seriously.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this work right, but hopefully you're watching us right now as if we're live. Unless you're listening to a podcast, then we're never live. But we're actually not live because we're recording this on Tuesday night because I am currently at the Philadelphia Phillies World Series Game 4.
Which got pushed back because of inclement weather.
Yes, and Houston Astro fans are very angry that we in Philadelphia like to play an outdoor game outside.
Yeah.
I have a lot of thoughts on the Houston Astros and their fan base. I'm going to keep them to myself.
I appreciate that because I think that could be an entire podcast in and of itself. And we do have a lot to talk about today because at 4 p.m.
NFL's drunk.
Technically today, when we're recording Tuesday, November 1st, was the trade deadline. So I'm going to give you some brief news first. We're going to go over all of our trades and give all of the trades that happened on the trade deadline, which was the most in NFL history, or in 30 years, I think it was. So some regular news first. Colts offensive coordinator Marcus Brady was fired, and Lions defensive backs coach Aubrey Pleasant was also fired. Some sad news. Former Vikings co-defensive coordinator, he was currently working for the Bengals as an offensive analyst. Adam Zimmer, who is the son of Mike Zimmer, passed away today at the age of 38. We do offer our condolences to everyone who knew him, his entire family. That is somebody who has been spoken about so highly throughout his career that is gone way too soon. For regular news, a couple more things. Packers linebacker Quay Walker was ejected from Sunday night football after pushing a Bills coach on the sidelines. I watched the whole thing happen, and then they just gave him a penalty, and I was like, wait a second. There's no way this is going to be just a penalty. And then the refs were like, yeah, we should probably eject him. So they did. And then I lost my show sheet there real quick. So give me 2 seconds.
PJ Walker is going to stay as the former XFL legend PJ Walker. I wasn't apologizing to you. I was apologizing.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Will stay as the Panthers starter, and Baker Mayfield will be the backup. And then Eagles wide receiver A.J. Brown had a random drug test on Monday morning after scoring 3 touchdowns in the first half.
I know. He tweeted about that. He's like, come on, Kamish. This is not random. I mean, we all knew it wasn't random, but
no,
that's one
never
of the most
random.
No, and there are a lot that are blatant, but that's one of the most blatant ones I've seen.
My favorite are kickers after kicking a long field goal and punters after having a long punt. Those are my favorite by far. Or like Pat McAfee making a tackle on special teams and he gets a drug test. Those are my favorite every time.
Those are some good ones. I remember Myles Garrett got drug tested all the time. Anytime he had a good game, they drug tested Myles Garrett.
I mean, look at that dude.
Right? I know.
Good for him.
I know. He did that spin move last night, and that was like, I would have drug tested him on the spot because that was just some elite football. But let's get into the trades. There are plenty of them. There are 2 that were from previous days, not from today. So those 2 are that the Giants traded wide receiver Kadarius Toney, who was the Giants' 2021 first-round pick, to the Chiefs for a 3rd and a 6th, both of those picks in 2023. That is, Kadarius Toney only played like 12 of 24 games in which he was on the roster. Most of those games he played, he didn't even play a full game. I think the Giants were just having a new regime that didn't really mesh well with Kadarius Toney, and just got what they could for him. And they do have Wan'Dale Robinson, who was, a Kadarius Toney dupe. So they're hoping that they could use him in the way they were hoping to use Kadarius Toney. The Bears traded linebacker Roquan Smith to the Ravens in return for a 2nd and a 5th and AJ Klein. And then all of the trades that happened today. Big one started off the day. TJ Hawkinson was traded to the Vikings. The Vikings got a 2023 4th round pick and a conditional 2024 4th round pick. And the Lions got a 2023 second round pick and a 2024 third round pick. He's someone who has been playing very well, and it was help that the Vikings needed with Irv Smith Jr., who we'll talk about in a little bit, placed on IR with an ankle injury. The Steelers traded wide receiver Chase Claypool to the Bears for a second rounder. This is their own second rounder, not the one that they got from the Ravens in that trade.
On Smith.
Yes. And Commanders traded cornerback William Jackson III to the Steelers. It still says undisclosed package for him, so I wasn't able to find all the details. The Broncos traded defensive end Bradley Chubb and a 2025 fifth rounder to the Dolphins for a 2023 first, a 2024 fourth, and Chase Edmonds. So Chase Edmonds has a new home. The 49ers trade running back Jeff Wilson to the Dolphins for a 2023 fifth. The Falcons trade wide receiver Calvin Ridley to the Jaguars for some draft capital that has a lot of stipulations because he is currently suspended. So a lot of that has to do with how fast he gets out of his suspension.
Yeah, because his suspension is indefinite, which means at the moment we don't have an end time for it.
Exactly. So there are a lot of stipulations in that trade based on, when he comes back, how much he plays, but that could be worth as much as a 2023 fifth. And I have the wrong number there, and a second, I think, in 2024.
Yeah, and real quick, I just want to say this. I'm going to put this out there in the world. Mm-hmm. The Jaguars in 2023 are about to be the 2017 Eagles.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
second year.
What they're doing there is
just putting it out there. Putting it out there. Well, it hasn't worked lately
yet, but
I can see
like
what
on paper, yes, that's what I mean. Like. A lot of their trades in the past have been, or just even their drafts have been like, what are you doing? Like a lot of like potential, but this seems like they have a very clear idea of where they want this team to go, and hope it works out for them. We also have the Colts, who traded running back Nyheim Hines to the Bills for a conditional fifth and Zach Moss, so they swap running backs. The Chiefs trade cornerback Rashawn Fenton to the Falcons for a conditional seventh, and the Falcons trade safety Dean Marlowe to the Bills for a 2023 seventh. There are a few players who were speculated to be traded who were not, and that includes Kareem Hunt, Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Cooks, DJ Moore, not quarterback Josh Allen, the other Josh Allen from the Jags. And I did want to read, Brandon Cooks put out a fairly cryptic tweet once the trade deadline passed, and that tweet read, "Don't take a man's kindness for granted, covered for the lies for too long, those days are gone, cross the line with playing with my career."
And he tweeted this 3 minutes after the trade deadline ended at 4:00 Eastern Standard Time. So
it seems somebody really wanted out of there. He was also absent from practice today. They did note it for personal reasons. I don't know if it was like there were deals that were on the table.
He personally wants to be traded. I think that was the personal reason. To speculate.
Yep. So anything you want to point out here? Anything that stands out to you? Anything?
I mean, Kareem Hunt was a really big one. I never really expected DJ Moore to get traded, just like I didn't necessarily expect Brian Burns. But Kareem Hunt's a big one. He wanted out, but supposedly the Cleveland Browns wanted a 4 for him.
Yeah.
And this was actually discussed on an Eagles podcast that I listened to, Bleeding Green Nation, because the Eagles and Kareem Hunt were linked for months. Mm-hmm. And it was pointed out that in the past, the Eagles had traded a 4th for Jay Ajayi. Kareem Hunt's a better player than Jay Ajayi was, but the reason they didn't get a 4th for him is it's purely a rental. Like, this is the final season on his contract. He costs more money. He's going to want a bigger contract, as opposed to Jay Ajayi, who was in the middle of his 3rd season on a 4-year contract, a 4-year rookie deal, getting paid a lot less money. So that's the big difference there, and why I don't think they got what they wanted for Kareem Hunt.
I agree. And speaking about the Eagles, I forgot to put it in the news section because it happened midday. Former Eagle great J.J. Arcega-Whiteside from the Seahawks was cut today.
Oh, you want to know who else was cut from the Seahawks?
Who?
Former Eagle great Sidney Jones, cornerback.
Lots of cuts.
Yep. Well, lots of former Eagles that are cut.
Lots of former Eagles. They all wish they could be back on the Eagles. We have a lot of teams on bye this week. We have the Browns, Giants, Cowboys, Steelers, Broncos, and Niners all on bye this week. or going into this week, I should say. For injuries, there were no quarterback injuries this week, so we'll skip right past that. Head straight to the running backs. Saints running back Mark Ingram suffered a knee injury and left the game early. It was ruled to be a grade 2 sprain. He'll likely miss around 3 to 4 weeks. Something happened. Can you look up with Gus Edwards?
Yeah.
Because apparently I forgot to stop. I stopped writing mid of that.
Yeah,
sentence.
so they expect him to be questionable this week. It's a hamstring injury, but it's reportedly minor.
Okay, perfect. And those are the only 2 notable running back injuries. For wide receivers, Ravens wide receiver Rashad Bateman will be out for a few weeks with a foot injury. He has missed a decent amount of time in his first 2 years, which is sad because especially the Ravens really need the help, and he just has been. And from what I read, it's re-aggravating that same injury, so they're having a hard time with helping him out there. So Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp is listed as day-to-day with an ankle sprain. It was noted that he has a significant amount of swelling in his ankle, but there is no structural damage, so they do seem to have dodged a bullet. Vikings wide receiver Adam Thielen had a scary injury during the game, but it was later ruled to be just a knee bruise. He is day-to-day, I believe. Patriots wide receiver Devontae Parker suffered a sprained knee in Sunday's game and will miss some time. Giants wide receiver / punt returner Richie James suffered a concussion on Sunday, and Packers wide receiver Christian Watson suffered a concussion. Tight ends for the Ravens. Ravens tight end Mark Andrews suffered a shoulder injury in this week's game. It seems to be nothing serious, and there is a chance at him returning this week. Vikings tight end Irv Smith Jr. is expected to miss 8 to 10 weeks with his ankle injury. He has been placed on IR, and then after that came out, it came out right after the IR came out right after they traded for TJ Hawkinson, but we knew that Irv Smith was going to miss a decent amount of time.
Correct, yeah.
For the Lions, tight end Brock Wright was ruled out this past week with a concussion. For offensive line, Panthers center Pat Elflein will be having season-ending hip surgery, so his season is over. Broncos center Lloyd Cushenberry left the game with a hip injury. Seahawks center Austin Blythe left the game with a knee injury. Bad week to be a center, apparently. The Texans guard Justin McCray left the game with concussion, and Dolphins guard Liam Eichenberg will miss some time with an MCL injury. For defense, Bengals cornerback Trey Flowers left the game with a hamstring injury. Bills safety Jordan Poyer suffered an elbow injury in the game, and he has no current timetable for his return. Packers linebacker Devondre Campbell was ruled out with a knee injury. Vikings defensive lineman Dalvin Tomlinson was ruled out with a calf injury. Giants defensive lineman Nick Williams left the game with a bicep injury. Eagles defensive tackle Jordan Davis suffered a high ankle sprain and is expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks. Eagles cornerback Josiah Scott sustained an ankle injury and did not return. I saw you unmuted. Did you want to say something about them?
Oh, no.
Okay. All right.
I mean, yes, but no.
Okay. Colts defensive end Tyquan Lewis will miss the rest of the season with a torn patellar tendon. And Bengals cornerback Chidobe Awuzie was carted off the field against the Browns in Monday Night Football. He is feared to have suffered a season-ending knee injury, which is suspected to be an ACL. So a little bit less injuries than we've had in past weeks, but still a decent amount of playmakers that did have some injuries this past week. But why don't you lead us into my favorite segment, your segment, 15-second frenzy.
Alrighty. So, as I explain every week, but I will continue to explain every week, I have 15 seconds per game this past week to explain what happened and what I thought was relevant or what I want to talk about. I can do whatever I want. Ashley's going to keep track of the time and tell me when I have to move on to the next matchup. So, Ashley, I am ready when you are.
All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
Ravens versus Bucks. Tom Brady continues to get the yards on offense, just not the touchdowns. The score was definitely closer than the game was, but for the first time in his career, Brady has 2 losses under 500. Shout out Isaiah Likely for a breakout game, and injuries are plaguing the offense, but Lamar is getting on track a little bit. Broncos versus the Jaguars. I guess the high knees worked for Russ, although a rather unspectacular game, no surprise. Greg Dulcich continues to shine. as a rookie tight end, and it's kind of been a nightmare for Lawrence, as he has not been the same for the last month of the season. But another outstanding game from ETN. Patriots versus the Jets. The Pats almost blew it. Mac Jones doesn't really look good, and neither does Zach Wilson, who had 3 picks in this game. Garrett Wilson got the ball a lot. Elijah Moore did not, and he also didn't get traded. Ramondre Stevenson continues to be the heart of the New England offense, with both teams now at or over 500.
Next.
Panthers versus Falcons. Wow, what a game. That was not to be expected. An incredible Hail Mary throw thrown by XFL legend PJ Walker to take the Falcons to overtime, and DJ Moore is loving his life these past 2 weeks. PJ Walker will continue starting as he should. Deonta Foreman's running well, and you finally let Mariota sling it. Bears versus Cowboys, almost 50 points for Dallas against an awful Bears defense, but they also almost let the Bears get back into the game in the middle there. Fields has actually been looking pretty impressive on offense, even if the numbers don't necessarily say that. And Tony Pollard has proved that Jerry Jones is a moron.
Next.
Dolphins versus Lions, a close but disappointing game for the Lions, giving up the lead and letting Miami walk away with the win. And his wide receivers continue to shine and prove that they are legit and a competitor in the AFC, while Dan Campbell can only cry so many times in a season.
Next.
Cardinals versus the Vikings. Another really good game this week coming down to the wire, with Hopkins reminding everyone that he's still a top wide receiver in the league. He had 12 for 159. The Vikings are about as complete as any team in the league, it seems like, and with their only loss being to the undefeated Eagles. The Cardinals continue to be all over the place. And
Next.
Raiders versus the Saints. It was really just Alvin Kamara versus the Raiders, and Alvin Kamara won, scoring his first touchdown of the season and also his second and third. To the Raiders, no touchdowns. Adams was not good this week, going 1 for 3, and in no world should Adams be getting only 5 targets a game in a game where you scored 0 points. Steelers versus the Eagles. A.J. Brown scored 3 times in the first half. Jalen Hurts and the entire starting offense left the game with about 9 minutes left. The Steelers defense had no answers, and their offense didn't have much to say to the Eagles defense either, especially the pass rush, which overpowered the Steelers offensive line and made Pickett's day horrible.
Next.
Titans versus the Texans. Malik Willis was horrible in his debut, just straight up not very good. But the Titans took the win against a bad Houston team anyway, with Derrick Henry carrying them to victory. It was once kind of a promising start to Houston, I think, for the beginning of the season. It's turned horrible pretty fast, with little keeping them from earning the number 1 overall pick. Commanders versus the Colts. Taylor Heineke is just fun to watch, man. He's easy to root for, and his legend continues to grow as he takes out Sam Ehlinger in his debut with a last-minute scoring drive to end the game. The Colts offense looks lost, and I'm not totally sure that Matt Ryan was the only problem. Meanwhile, Niners versus Rams. This game was really not even competitive. CMC had a passing, rushing, and receiving touchdown in his second game with his new team, and he's the first player to do that since LaDainian Tomlinson. Kittle's also kind of starting to come on lately, and I really wish I had more to say about the Rams in general, but they've got problems that I don't think can be fixed anytime soon. Giants versus the Seahawks. The Giants finally were the team making costly mistakes and not playing a perfect game. And when you don't have the talent that some of these other teams have, you need to play a perfect game to win. Seattle looked awesome again. Geno Smith continues to roll. It wasn't a pretty game and not really a fun game for the majority of it until the end.
Next.
But Packers versus Bills. The Bills outclassed the Packers. Josh Allen outclassed Aaron Rodgers, and it really wasn't the best game for either the Bills or Josh Allen. But a big bounce back game from the rookie Romeo Doubs. But at some point we have to accept that I don't think we're actually going to see a bounce back from the Packers.
Next.
Bengals versus Browns. Not a good game for the Bengals on national television. Brissett was solid, but Amari Cooper was awesome, as was Nick Chubb. Once the Browns get a lead like that, it's hard for anyone to catch up because of what they have in Nick Chubb, which is an ability to eat the clock unlike no one else. Also a very forgettable night for Evan McPherson, who did not do his part in attempting a comeback.
Amari Cooper was great, except for that one time he tried to play quarterback.
Yeah, well, yeah. I was ignoring that. He was great as a receiver.
Yeah, he was. It was a pretty crazy week. I feel like the NFL, by the time you get to the next game, like slate of games, you kind of have to forget what just happened, unless it's your team, in order to be able to keep up. So during the 15-second frenzy is like, I remember all of these things. You mentioned Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is decided that, or very openly in a press conference said, you know, Tony Pollard had an amazing game, but when Ezekiel Elliott is healthy, he will be our number 1.
And his exact words were, "We will go where Zeke Elliott takes us."
Yeah.
What a moronic comment.
Yeah.
What a just a You're really putting it on your back of the running back who's not even the best running back on your depth chart, let alone a running back in the year 2022. You're putting, Jesus Christ, he's a moron.
Yeah.
And
he always has something to say. He usually goes on like morning talk radio shows very often. So if you're ever looking for some interesting comments by Jerry Jones, just tune into Dallas Sports Radio in the morning, and he usually will have something silly to say. But speaking of poor decisions, we are going to get into what is my favorite episode we do in the season, which is the Coach's Hot Seat episode, in which we look at not all, but most coaches around the league who have either been struggling or just not living up to what their organizations had hoped from them, and determine if they really are on a hot seat, if we think that they will end up without a job at the end of the starting head coaching job at the end of the year, or maybe even before. So we do have a decent amount of coaches at this point in the year where they are on the hot seat. I know I kind of just put these in there in no particular order. Is there anywhere you would like to start?
We can start with Cliff.
All right, let's start with Cliff Kingsbury, current head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. His 2022 record with this team is 3-5. His overall record is 27-29-1. He recently signed an extension with the Cardinals through 2027, around the same time as they signed Kyler Murray. How are you feeling about Cliff Kingsbury?
He's not an NFL head coach,
no,
and he's not he's like the primary example of someone trying to find the next McVay. Like that is literally to a T what he is. And I'm not a huge fan of McVay. Like I've been very open about that. I think he's generally overrated. But McVay is also, he is a smart human being. Cliff Kingsbury, I'm not sure is, because so you have listed one of the things, like horrible time management. He's not good at making head coaching decisions in game. He's not good at game management. And part of the reason, I would imagine, is because he's also the offensive coordinator and the play caller.
Yeah.
He is doing everything on game day, and he shouldn't be. Yep. There's a quote, I believe he said, about like letting Kyler call plays for a series because he wanted to see that it wasn't that easy or something like that, which is just like a stupid, like, what are you trying to prove, bro? That's your job.
Yeah. And you wanted to do that because you could easily hand over those duties.
Yeah.
And it seems like in this quest to do everything, he is losing the locker room. I mean,
as he should be.
Exactly. And I don't, Kyler Murray has not been playing up to his contract or expectations, but to have a screaming match with a player on the sideline is a good indicator that you are starting to lose a locker room or have already lost a locker room. I put horrible time management in there because of this game this past, like a couple weeks ago. I think it was like 2 weeks ago, in which he genuinely just used timeouts on a whim, like for no clear reason, or not very obvious reason to viewers, to fans. But
which if it's not an obvious reason, it means that he's overloading himself. He's overwhelming himself, and he's not getting the play calling in time. Which, by the way, all you have to do is watch a game. There is at least 1 or 2 times every game where they're calling a timeout because the play clock gets down to 0 and they're not ready because it's taking him forever to get the play call in.
Yep. And you could tell because Kyler always looks to the sidelines with this lost expression and his hands up in the air. Like, what? And then it's costing you at the end of games. And you can see that in their record. You could see that at the end of every one of their games. They're getting in, or in some occasions are in closer games, and just do not have the timeouts to be able to keep up because they're using them for unnecessary reasons, or reasons that should be unnecessary if Cliff hands it over maybe even one of his duties. So I don't know. I know they just signed an extension with him, so I don't know that they really
stupid when it happened.
I don't know that they want to get embarrassed, but I don't think he should be a head coach at the end of the year, but I think they're going to try and keep him around.
It sucks. It just sucks. It really sucks. He's not good at his job. He should be coaching in the Pac-12 or wherever, where he can just outthink everybody.
Yeah.
It's just dumb. He's
yeah.
I don't have a lot, like I wish I had more constructive things to say, but he's kind of just an idiot and I don't like him.
Well, while we're on the topic of thinking a little bit too much, I do want to jump down the list a little bit to Brandon Staley, because I know that often falls in line with the thinking we're having here. And his current record is those 9? No, what is his current record for the Chargers? 4-3. 4-3. Sorry, I had them backwards. And his overall record, you're 9-8.
What?
What's his overall record?
That 9-8 was last season.
Oh, last season. Okay, that's why I was like 9-8's not a full season.
Sorry,
okay, and he went 9-8 last season. No, you're good. You're good. So I know you have a lot of thoughts about Brandon Staley, so I do want to hear what you have to say. I do know, like I said, that some of it does have to do with his kind of over analyzing of every game.
Yes. Can you talk first? There's actually one thing that I want to find. I want to see if I can find it, and I should have been more prepared.
Yeah, no, you're good. So I fall in line with your thinking. I know you and I have had these conversations, not on camera. But my thinking with him is I do think he is going to remain a head coach. I think he has good ideas. I just don't know that the execution is there. And I think he's trying to big brain football a lot more than it has to be big brained. And I am someone who's in love with analytics in sports. I know that's a very divisive issue. I love analytics in sports, but at certain times it's just sports and you have to go with your gut. You have to stop looking at numbers as much. There were, I believe, at least 2 games in which it seemed like he went with analytics for going for a touchdown or a field goal, and it cost them a game. And that would not even just this season, last season, but last season he was getting praised for it because the team was performing. And this season he is catching a little bit of flack for it because the team isn't performing as well as fans had hoped. I do think Brandon Staley has good intentions with what he's doing. I just don't think the execution is there at this point.
I kind of think that I agree. I'm just trying one last time to find. Is this it? No. Oh my God. There was a really, really good chart and I wanted to talk about it and give credit to whomever it is. Is this it? Yes, I found it. Okay. All right, I found it. All right. So shout out to at Ben B. Baldwin, Computer Cowboy on Twitter.
Love Computer Cowboy.
He's with the Athletic. So this is an awesome chart that basically charts out the landscape of all the teams in the NFL and how they make their fourth down decisions. Basically, top right is where you want to be, which is you do it when you're supposed to and you're aggressive. Top left is you do it when you're supposed to, but you're not as aggressive. You're more conservative. Bottom right is you're confused, which means you're aggressive, but you don't necessarily do it when you're supposed to. Bottom left is just kind of full of fear. And I bring this up because Brandon Staley was one of the head coaches that was, being praised for the way that he was going for it on fourth down in the past. And he is not in a good place on this chart. He is in the bottom left, which means he's not doing it when he should. And he's also very conservative about it, which matches up with like things that we've seen from different players. Like Keenan Allen a couple weeks ago, I remember was very confused about like a fourth down call when they punted. And like, that's the thing. It's just, last season, I think it was just cool to see another head coach kind of going for it. And the conversation around analytics is absolute crap. It's horrible because it shouldn't be a conversation. Like people here and the NFL announcers are very much, it's their fault.
Yeah.
Because analytics is not this like mumbo jumbo crap that it's like, but the feel of the game. No, it's literally saying like, hey, if you go for this, you're more likely to win the game. Like most of the time in this scenario, it's very easy to get a first down if you go for it on fourth down. And it's just like, it should not be this much of a conversation. It really shouldn't be. But the fact that there are so few teams that are doing this the right way means that it's still way too much of a conversation. And by the way, the guy who is most by the books and by far the most aggressive lean, if I gave you one guess, who would it be?
Oh, God. I don't know.
It's a very easy answer. You can see it right behind me.
Oh, that's I was gonna see. You every time you ask me who it is, I want to say the Eagles because I know you point.
Well, no,
those
it's
teams
not
out.
the Eagles. It's
Oh,
Doug Peterson.
Doug Peterson. Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Which, by the way, and I don't remember this man's name, Ryan Pagnetti. I do remember his name.
Mhm.
He was with Doug Peterson with the Eagles, and he's now with him with the Jags. He literally, his job is to be in Doug Peterson's ear during the game saying, this is the information you need to know about going forward on fourth down.
Mhm.
And then Doug makes the call.
Yeah.
And the other teams that are in the by the books aggressive lean, like some of these head coaches, the Eagles, the Jaguars, the Ravens, well, the Lions are also there, and the
They
Cardinals
just have to make fourth
are
down
there.
decisions a lot. So.
Yeah. And the Lions, I will give them the credit. I've seen them make good decisions. They just don't necessarily always work out.
Yeah.
The Bills and the Titans are also by the book, doing it when they should, even if it's, on a more conservative side.
Mhm.
So yeah, all this to say, oh no, never mind. I'm good. Nope,
Okay.
I closed the show sheet. I'm back. All this to say that I just don't think Brandon Staley is actually that good of a head coach. I think he's fine.
Mhm.
But with what they invested in this offseason, especially in that defense, the team has just been insanely disappointing. And they've been dealing with injuries, and they're the Chargers, which I guess counts for something in that scenario. But he's probably not going to get fired because they're probably going to have I would expect they probably end up going like 9-8 again. I mean, they're 4-3 right now. They're going to miss Mike Williams for the next month. And they've already lost. JC Jackson is out the whole year, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think I think next year will be the hot seat season for him, where it'll come out of this year and people will start having the conversation, and he could be a very early firing next season. But I don't, unless something catastrophic happens, I don't see him getting fired this season.
I completely agree with you. All right, so we can jump right back up to the top. We can head on to Arthur Smith, head coach of the Falcons, who is currently 4-4 and went 7-10 last year. How are you feeling about Arthur Smith?
I hate Arthur Smith. He might be my least favorite coach in the NFL. He did redeem himself a little bit this past weekend.
Yes.
I'll give him that. But
this week, I felt like he was playing with his job on the line.
Yeah, he just. Yeah. I don't like him. I think that he's very, very. He's. And I think this happens. Like he rose through the ranks in Tennessee. Like that, he spent his whole career there, as far as I'm aware. Like he rose from like the very bottom of that organization all the way up, and he rose there. And they had Derrick Henry, and he has one mindset, and that is we're gonna run the piss out of the ball. I believe is his legitimate quote from earlier in the season, and he's proved that because you're getting blown out, and he's passing the ball 13 times. Like that is a legitimate thing that happened this season. And I give him credit. They did let Mariota sling it to mixed results last week, and I guess they're getting wins, but I don't. It's the type of coaching strategy that works when it works, but then when it doesn't, he's proven completely incapable of adjusting in any way whatsoever, which is just the hallmark of a horrible coach, in my opinion.
Yep. And to me, even if he's getting wins, Arthur Smith is not a coach I want there while I'm trying to rebuild an entire offense. And for that, I think his seat should be hot. I have mixed feelings on if this is something that they are even going to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you. It's, what is this, second season or first season?
Second.
Yeah, second season.
Yep.
I don't know. I agree. I don't really have a strong feeling that they will consider it because it's not like they have a ton. He's doing that's the weird thing. They don't have a good team, but they're 4-4 and pseudo leading the division. He's not going to lose his job, but I also don't think he's a good head coach. And it sucks that I'm just waiting for the day that they get their quarterback, which I don't know when that's going to happen or whatever, but they're going to have a good team. And we're all going to be like, wow, Arthur Smith sucks. And then they're just going to waste time with whatever good team they build, if they build a good team, because he's not a good coach. And he's not going to be, unless he changes something about his mindset, he's not going to be able to maximize the quarterback that comes in here, with the rare exception that it's a Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson level runner.
I was just going to say that.
But even then, what has that gotten either of them in the NFL so far? Because it's like one playoff win, I think.
Yep.
And look at Jalen Hurts. Like, he had 2 rushing attempts yesterday. And they're undefeated. Like, smart head coaches understand how to win in this league and running the piss out of the ball. Unless you have Derrick Henry, which, by the way, no one else does, it's not going to work very often. So
yeah. Yep. I do want to talk about a coach who I already can read the writing on the wall is I'm jumping on the show sheet a little bit, having a lot of conversations about losing his job. Because after every game, he has a conversation, a very long talk and debrief about the game with his GM. And that is Raiders head coach Josh McDaniels. He is currently sitting at 2-5 in his first year as a head coach. He was previously a head coach, didn't work out. He's getting a second chance, and it does not seem to be working out this time either. His offense this week did not pass the midfield line until the fourth quarter. In any capacity, passing or running.
Yeah, that's great.
No, and that is an insanely competitive division, and they were hoping to be in the running, especially, you could see they traded for Devontae Adams, they extended Derek Carr. So there have been reports that come out after games, especially after this past game, that he does have conversations, very lengthy conversations with the GM after game time, which doesn't seem like a good sign. I think if you have to be having debriefs with your GM every other game about how your team is underperforming, it's probably not a good sign that you're going to keep your job.
Yeah. I wish I agreed with you. I just don't think that his seat is very hot. I just kind of get the feeling that they're in it with him for the long haul, for better or worse. I mean, I think that generally speaking, it's a fairly patient front office and ownership. I think they really like Josh McDaniels, and I do think that he's probably doing a better job than his record indicates. But I mean, like, a lot of it, like, some of it is just kind of unexcusable. I mean, like, they rank well in a lot of different areas. Like, but you're right. It's not translating to wins. And I think he's one of the toughest people on this list for me, because I agree with everything you said, but I'm just not wholly convinced that the Raiders agree.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I agree. Like, I don't think it's as big of a disaster as his time in Denver, at least not yet. And I think the fact that they signed Derek Carr to an extension, which I think might be a little bit kind of like false money. Like, I need to relook at it, but I do remember that I think they can get out of it pretty easily, even after this year. As well as traded for Devontae Adams. Like, I don't think they want to go into a rebuild anytime soon. So I don't know. And he is a proven offensive mind. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I would say, given all of the weirdness in the NFL this season, I think he's kind of getting off easy.
Yeah. So, and I will also say that I do think he will have a job at the end of the season, even though there is a decent amount of external pressure on the organization to not have him, which I know they don't often listen to, but I just want to note. I do think they may be easily able to chalk it up as this division is stacked and this year was wild and weird, and we're going to keep you around. Let's try next year.
Is it a stacked division, though? I mean, we just talked about how we don't like Brandon Staley.
We don't like Brandon Staley.
Well, actually, all three of the head coaches, other than Andy Reid from that division, are on this list.
Yeah, I know. So. But why don't we? I'll go back up the show sheet because I saw you were excited to talk about him, because we talked about this one for a very long time on our coach's hot seat last year, and that is Bengals head coach Zach Taylor, who is. You write the stat. You wrote those ones. Why don't you read them?
Yeah. So he went. He went 2-14 his first season, 4-11 his second season. That was when they drafted Joe Burrow, but he tore his ACL. 10-7, leading, getting all the way to the Super Bowl and losing, and they are currently 4-4, just coming off of a very rough loss in prime time. So I do want to start with something real quick.
Okay.
I'm looking for the stat. So last year they were middle of the pack in terms of just the percentage of the time that they threw the ball. And I criticized them very heavily about that. You and I did, like, it was a bad offense. They weren't actually doing anything to help that. Like, he was not doing anything to help their offense. This year they are 4th in the league in team passing play percentage, which that's a good thing in my mind.
Yeah.
Because it's gone up steadily over the weeks. Like, Joe Burrow is finally being allowed to sling it. It's not the most predictable offense that I've ever seen, which is what we saw last year and what we saw at the beginning of this year a little bit. So I do give Zach Taylor credit for that, which is the ability to actually change what he's doing, because that's what we've been talking a lot about right now. Is,
people stuck in their ways.
Exactly. And it does seem like, and I'm worried about what's going to happen when Jamar Chase, now that Jamar Chase, my thing fell, that Jamar Chase is going to be out for the next month. Like, how does does he go back to what he was doing? But I'm beginning to change my tune on Zach Taylor a little bit. I still don't think he's a great head coach. I don't think he's worthy of getting
Coach
to a
of the year.
Super Bowl. Yeah, that kind of thing. But I will give him credit where credit's due, because I do believe that he is changing his tune a little bit.
I do agree with you. And I gave you pushback last year. I know you were firmly on the, Zach Taylor should not have a job last year. And I gave you pushback then. I do think we've kind of both middled out a little bit more, because I'm kind of torn with him, because I feel like there's going to be a scapegoat at the end of this season if this keeps up the way it is. I don't know that it will be him, but I think they'll have a conversation, except for the fact that he is like a Cincinnati legend now, because he brought them to a Super Bowl last year after the long drought. But I like you said, I give him kudos for changing, because the NFL is an ever-changing league, and it's hard as humans to change. We know that through science, that it's hard to change your ways. So I do give him big props for changing, and being able to notice strengths in his offense, which I feel like he was missing last year.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah.
And then we have Mike McCarthy, who seems to always be in this position. And I feel like this is a lot less of a hot seat than it has been in the past.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I found the stat I was looking for.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Early down pass rate over expected.
Perfect.
This is what the Bengals were very bad at last year. And this year they are 4th in the league, tied for 4th in the league, behind the Chiefs, the Bills, the Bucks, and tied with the Chargers. So,
and that's an interesting stat to look at, because early down passing is, if you're constantly running the ball on early downs, your offense becomes entirely too predictable, because then you're throwing the ball on late downs, which nearly everybody does, because that's what you do when you need to gain 10 yards on a 3rd down. So that's a very important stat to look at. So seeing as how he changed is a big deal. But we'll jump to Mike McCarthy, who was 6-10 in his first year. He was 12-5 in his second, and went 0-1 in playoffs, and then is currently 6-2. He is the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I thought that he would be the obvious scapegoat when Dak went down and the team sucked. They're performing well. He's not going to get fired this season unless there's a massive collapse. What the real question is for me is, one, looking at the offense outside of just winning games, I want to see what the offense looks like overall. They, by the way, are negative 6% on early down pass rate, and They weren't good with the fourth down thing either. No, yeah, they're in the full of fear, bottom left category. Place you really don't want to be. I don't think Mike McCarthy is a good head coach. I don't think he's a very good offensive mind. I don't think he's evolved at all since his time in Green Bay. And I think a lot of his time in Green Bay, he was very much helped by Aaron Rodgers. I think that he is being saved by Dan Quinn right now. But yeah, all that to say, he's not going to get fired. But when Dan Quinn gets hired to be a head coach, next year is the year that I look to see, one, he could prove me wrong, or two, I don't know how long he'll last in Denver. Or he's not in Denver. Dallas.
No, in Dallas.
I don't know why I said Denver.
Because we're talking about Denver next.
Well,
but yeah, I completely agree with you. I think Dan Quinn is the only reason. It's hard to say on a week that they're coming off of almost putting 50 points up, but Dan Quinn is the reason they're winning games. Because his defense is keeping them in the game always. And what he's done with that defense is like to be studied, of how he's been able to use this defense, how he's been able to draft this defense, and the success he's had with it. This is what defensive coaches aspire to do with defenses. And it pains me to say that because we're both NFC East fans, but what happened with this defense is incredible. And they're way over. They were expected to perform well. They are outperforming that expectation. So I think Dan Quinn is entirely keeping them in games and, like you said, bailing them out. I did mention when I first brought up Mike McCarthy's name, I think this is probably the least amount of hot his seat has ever been. So he will have a job at the end of this year, and next year will be the year I think we're really talking about what the end of the year will bring for him. But the most talked about hot seat, and I think the hottest of hot seats, who got bailed out by his high-kneeing quarterback this week, is Nathaniel Hackett, head coach of the Broncos, who's currently sitting at 3-5. You have so many thoughts. I know you do.
Matt LaFleur?
No, Nate Hackett.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw 3-5 and my eyes skipped Nathaniel Hackett. Yeah, he's just not very good.
No.
But like, unlike a lot of people on this list, I think he realizes he's not very good. So shout out to him for that. Doesn't mean you shouldn't fire him. There were rumors that he would be fired if they lost this game.
In London. Yep.
Which I don't know how you like put that out there.
And then they win and you keep them.
Like, that's like, it's like, hey, we're going to fire you if you don't do well with this. It's like, okay, now he's supposed to be happy that he didn't get fired. It's like, that just means his next loss, you're going to fire him. Like, it's stupid, first of all. Unless they end up firing the person, it just never works out, right away. Yeah, he's just not very good. Russ isn't very good. Everything is just an absolute mess right now.
Yep.
In Denver, and I don't think he's the sole culprit of it.
No, absolutely not.
But I also don't think that they are going to sit around and keep him around after this waste of a season. And they are paying Russ way too much money to cut him. So I do believe it will be Nathaniel Hackett. Yep.
They need a scapegoat, and they need a big scapegoat. It's not going to be an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator. Their defense is playing well, but you get my point. It's not going to be a guy down the ladder. It's going to be Nate Hackett. And I almost texted you about it, but I wanted to bring it up on the show. The one person we don't have on this list is our dearly beloved grandpa, Pete Carroll. And
he's doing great.
He's doing great. And we talked so much about Pete Carroll last year. And I think we unfortunately put a lot of the blame on Pete Carroll when I think there was blame to go around to us, a lot more blame to go to Russell Wilson than expected.
Yeah, I mean, both yes and no. They are tied with the Eagles for the 5th best early down pass rate over expected, which is very unlike Pete Carroll. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about him because I don't think he's going to get fired. But
no, I know, but I just had to bring it up.
I also don't think he was as good of a coach last year as he is this year.
Very true.
Which, again, he's been a good coach, so I'm not overly surprised that he was able to change and get better because he didn't become a Super Bowl winning coach by accident.
Yeah. One guy who seems very far away from a Super Bowl is Mr. Dan Campbell, head coach of the Detroit Lions, who went 3-13 in his first year. He's currently in his second year at 1-6. How do you feel? I love Dan.
So there was a tweet, and I read it, and then I kept scrolling, and it's been sticking in my head, and I apologize because I do not remember who tweeted it. But you can only cry so many times and have it still be impactful. And I think that's what Dan Campbell is learning, or is going to learn soon, that he has so much passion, and I love him as a human being, and as a head coach, that's awesome. But I just don't know if they're overusing him on these bad teams.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't know if he'll be around to see into the good years. And I don't think it's just his fault.
No.
He's definitely not a perfect head coach at all. Absolutely not. He makes pretty questionable decisions a decent amount of the time. Like there was a very specific one in the Eagles game that I had an issue with. Just decision making in general. I think he's gotten better as the season's gone on. And then he is pretty good on fourth down. He's actually right next to the Eagles, like we said. But I just don't know. They're not winning games.
Yep.
Maybe something changes if they can get a quarterback. I think his seat is probably pretty hot, and I think it'll be a shame if they don't give him a chance with a good team.
I completely agree.
So.
And like, I love that he wins over hearts and minds, but it's not enough in the NFL on most days. So he is, one of my favorite people in this league as a person, as who he is behind the scenes of it all. But it's just hard to keep him around when things aren't working. But on the flip of it, he did inherit a dynasty of bad. You know what I mean? Like an enormous amount of bad. So it's hard to expect a coach to go out and win, like fully be able to win in his second season with a roster. The roster's gone up. It has,
and
but
better,
with a roster that still has so many holes. So like you said, I really do think there are going to be considerations on replacing him, but I hope that they give him a chance, because I think he is one of those special coaches who would be able to take a team far if he has just enough talent. I'm not saying he needs, the most talent an NFL team has ever seen. I think he needs just enough talent.
I agree.
Someone who has had some talent, has a 2-time back-to-back MVP champion, is Matt LaFleur, who's been there for he's in his 4th season.
Yep.
He went 13-3 in the first one, lost in the conference championship, went 13-3 in the second one, lost in the conference championship, went 13-4 in the third one, lost in the divisional round, and is currently sitting at 3-5 with the team that does not look good.
Yeah, this one for me is easy. He's not going to get fired, and I don't think the seat is very hot because he won 13 games 3 years straight, and it's not like his MVP quarterback looks very good either.
No.
And I think there's certain teams where you can look at the quarterback and you can look at the head coach and you can say, kind of like I was saying about like Denver. I don't think Nathaniel Hackett is necessarily getting a fair shot because Russell's just been garbage.
Yep.
And when you invest that much in that quarterback, like sometimes there's not a lot an offensive head coach can do. There's not a lot a head coach can do in general. And I think this is one of those scenarios. Like, I think Matt LaFleur is a good coach. I think he's proven that. But if Aaron Rodgers isn't playing well and they don't have the pieces because their GM is an idiot and just refuse, like, you finally spend a second rounder on at least a second rounder on a wide receiver for the first time since Devontae Adams, who you should not have traded away. And instead of drafting George Pickens, you draft Christian Watson, who has been a complete non-factor when he's even playing if he's not injured. Horrible all around, because that was also your only solution. That and the ghost of Randall Cobb. So terrible job. So I don't think he gets fired. I think it's a very easy case of like, we'll just chalk it up to whatever. And who knows if Aaron Rodgers is around next year? We'll see.
Yeah. Yep. And I do want to say, I didn't really preface who we had on this list. I did put a decent amount of coaches on here who I think you and I are in agreement with, including this one that you won't get fired, but is having a bad season or kind of getting on a bad track record. So I'm in complete agreement with you. I think they're going to chalk this one up as someone else's fault, kind of just front office failures and underperformance. But when you take a team to the playoffs 3 years in a row, including your first year, I don't think you can chalk one bad season up as firing this guy, especially with like a talentless roster. So at least on offense. And there is a lot of conversation about our next coach, and that is Lovie Smith, who's in his first year. He's won 5-1. But there's been talk about that he was just kind of a placeholder for now. How are you feeling about Lovie Smith?
That's so stupid because the guy who was there last year was a placeholder. Like,
yeah.
I don't know why anyone would want to coach for this team if you just keep hiring and firing after 1 year. So my thoughts here are pretty simple. They don't have a good roster, so I would not fire Lovie Smith. I don't think you should have fired the last guy whose name is escaping me, the former wide receivers coach at a bunch of places, including the Ravens, Eagles, and Chiefs, I believe. I don't think you should have fired him because I think they looked better last year than they did this year. But I like I said, I didn't think they should fire him last year, and they did. So maybe they're going to fire Lovie Smith. That's really stupid if they do, and I think you're just throwing your organization into further disarray for nothing, because it's not like you're giving him much of a chance with that roster. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think his seat should not necessarily be hot because it's an awful team and he's in his first year, and like, what do you really expect from him? So,
and it's just such a bad roster. Somebody the other day was like, so obviously it's a little different for you and I because we, do this and have to watch the NFL very intently. But someone the other day, and like close friend who's just a fan of football, like casual fan of football, was like, I can't even really name 3 people on the Texans right now. And, I'm not saying notable names always mean a good roster, but this team has no one. This team has no one. And now you're losing. Brandon Cooks doesn't want to play for you anymore either. He was like your last big one. I agree. I think they might. I think they should keep him, even if it's just to save face for the organization, because you're going to have no coaching talent that wants to come in there if they're just coming in for 1-year deals. I don't see why anyone would want to go there with a team that's not improving, that they're not. If they continue to just keep rehiring head coaches, it's likely that a team does not improve because of this constant carousel. And I don't see why anyone would want to come in and coach for you. So that one is, I really do hope they keep Lovie Smith and give him a chance at least, because this is not a real chance. But Mike Tomlin, who I'm just putting on this list, same reason, is having a little bit of a rough season with a new roster. He's 156, 91, and 2. He's currently 2-6. He has never had a losing season since he was hired in 2007, and he is 1-1 in Super Bowls.
Yeah, he's not going to get fired. If they fire him, they're idiots, which I don't think they are. So I don't think he's going to get fired.
Nope, I agree with you. I just put him on there just to name his name. We're talking bad records, so just put him on there just to point it out. But 2 coaches left. Ron Rivera we'll start with, whose current record is 4-4. His overall record with Washington is 19-23. He's had 1 playoff appearance in 2020. That's the year that Taylor Heineke had to play and lost. Well, had a close game, but ended up losing with Tom Brady. Yeah, that was Taylor Heineke's breakout. I love him.
Yeah, I don't know what to think about Ron Rivera. I would fire him, I think. Like, I don't think he's really helping this team outside of being a strong presence. But the thing is this team doesn't have a strong presence other than him. Like, he's like, it's embarrassing how much he is, like, people treat him just like he's the pseudo owner because no one takes their ownership seriously.
Yep.
Like, Dan Snyder is a piece of garbage, to put it lightly, and deserves to be forced to sell his team.
Deserves to be in prison.
Well, that too. So I don't know. Like, I don't know if he's willing to just go out on a limb and like think he's a good coach or not. Ron Rivera is probably one of the most beloved people in the NFL.
Yep.
And I don't know if Dan Snyder is just going to be able to like throw him out the door.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the things that's helping him is you have this awesome culture guy in there that everyone knows.
It's their only culture.
Yeah, exactly.
Ron Rivera is their only culture.
Only positive culture.
Yeah, very true.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think he's necessarily a good head coach, but whatever.
I think you fire Ron Rivera, you are not going to have players want to come there. You are not going to have coaches want to come there, and you're going to have players who actively want to leave there.
Yeah.
If they keep current ownership and fire Ron Rivera. His current performances, I think he probably should be without a job. I think he would be better off in a different coaching job. But yeah, this organization's so weird. Like I think he probably shouldn't be a head coach, but I think he is their only face of the organization right now. And
Yep.
without him, I think there's no chance that this organization should still be an organization. So I think they're going to end up keeping him around. And finally, big topic of conversation, Frank Reich, whose 2022 record is 3-4-1. He's the head coach of the Colts. His overall record is 40-32-1, and he's in his 5th year with the team.
So, fun fact that I didn't even think about, and I can go back and find the information for this, the tweet that pointed it out to me. By the way, Tennessee has been named number 1 in the college football playoff rankings in the inaugural or whatever. So Zach Kiefer said, we underestimated this at the time, but the Colts lost a heck of an offensive mind when Nick Sirianni left to take the Eagles job in 2021. Though Reich calls the plays, Sirianni had a large role in game planning, scheming, play scripts. Colts offense hasn't been the same since. And I hadn't thought about that. Because I think like most people, were pretty underwhelmed with the Nick Sirianni move, especially because we all knew that Frank Reich was the head coach, and we all like Eagles fans liked Frank Reich. We thought highly of him. They have issues. They fired their offensive coordinator earlier today, and I don't see what that's going to solve.
Nothing.
Because Frank Reich is the play caller.
Yeah.
And it's not like he's adding another voice to help change the play designs and the scheming and the scripts and all. He's just taking a voice away. And Jim Irsay, I do not consider him he takes his time when he makes decisions, is what I'm trying to say. And I don't think that he's impulsive. I do not think he's going to make an impulsive decision when it comes to Frank Reich. I have a feeling that Frank Reich will get to see out the end of the season. But I think probably because I think he's respected. And I don't think there's a way that this team really turns it around and makes the playoffs, to be honest. And I think that's a big deciding factor for me. And I don't think he's egregious, but I just don't think he's the guy I'd want going forward. I think you need to tear it down in a lot of ways. So, yeah, I do think that he gets fired at the end of the season, but I think his seat is very, very hot.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really have too much to add other than what you said. I just think that this organization has been trying to fix the problem by other means, and I think the problem just like a snake has to have its head cut off type of thing, I think they just kind of need to start fresh. The offense feels dry and predictable and is just not good all around. The defense hasn't been super stellar. They need some sort of spark, and I think that's where they're going to get it from, and I think rightfully so. I would love to make a case for him, but I don't think he stays on as head coach after this year.
Yeah. I agree.
I think he's, what is it, Black Tuesday? Black Tuesday. I think he's going to be a victim of Black Tuesday.
I agree.
Yeah. Either way, we did run a little bit over. Thank you for listening to my favorite episode. Duncan, lead us out with where we can find you.
You can find me currently in the Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia, watching the Phillies hopefully winning Game 4. And hopefully getting ready for a party on Broad Street in a few days. So, yeah. Other than that, you can find me on Twitter at mpduncan75. You can find me hosting the Under the Wire pregame show to help you with your fantasy drafts on the FF Chat Discord. Or not your fantasy drafts, your fantasy start sits. Sunday mornings at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And on the Undroppables Patreon.
Yep. And you can find me on Twitter at Ashley_Maria with 2 A's at the beginning of Ashley. You could find me with all of my content with the Undroppables at theundroppables.com and at the Undroppables on Twitter. Twitter is the best place to find me, but you can get access to me, Duncan, the entire Undroppables team by becoming a patron at patreon.com/theundroppables. For a small price, you get invited into our exclusive Discord channels where you can even win some money with the sports bets that we have going on there, including your two incredible sports bets that are still
I had a
riding.
good. Wait. Oh yeah. Well, I actually had a
Uh-huh.
good weekend otherwise because
Oh, okay.
I found a very good CMC line that I liked,
Love it.
and I put some money down. I made some money this weekend, and yeah, I placed an Eagles Super Bowl bet the day after the Super Bowl last year,
Mhm.
which just continues to rise. And I have
Mhm.
a Jalen Hurts MVP bet that I placed over the summer, and every week I just watch the cash out just go up and up
Yep.
and up, and it's beautiful. So yeah,
Yep. They remind you, they're like, hey, just
just
do you
in
want
case.
anything? Can we just offer you a couple bucks to go? But I hope you enjoy your time at your outdoor baseball game.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone. Have a good week.
Go Phillies.